Let's see here. What should we talk about first? Okay, that's not what I wanted to put there. What to talk about first? Oh, and the rail strike. Why don't we talk about the UK rail strike? This is something that United Kingdom rail strike that's apparently popping off over in the UK. Is there's a massive railroad worker strike, and it's popping off, and they're trying to create anti-rail worker sentiment. Of course, what do you know? The media is trying to be against the union striking workers. What a surprise!
Doesn't support the railway strikes. And to promote the view that nobody else does, they did an interview with a tax. It won't come as a surprise to learn that GB News doesn't support the railway strikes. And to promote the view that nobody else does, they did an interview with a taxi driver. From the question they ask, it's clear they assumed he would slag off the strikers. But take a look at what happened next.
It's tough times for the taxi drivers, and it's even tougher times now that these rail strikes are going to put a squeeze on your trade.
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to say that the men and women of the train unions are totally 100% back, and they have a right to stand up for the working rights. And it's unfortunate that we don't have more unions that are strong enough to stand up for that. I'm an ex-coal miner myself, so I believe in the union structure. But yeah, I totally support them. If it has to bite on us, then so be it. You know, we're prepared to do that. You know, we made a stronger stuff around these ports.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks.
And they dip immediately. Ask him one question and then dip. That's not how the man on the street interview works, chat. One question and dip. Uh-oh. Oops. See, I think there is a stereotype that the white British taxi driver is a little bit conservative, a little bit racist. And from my experience, you're going to get this kind of class politics a lot when you talk to them.
Talking to me.
It's a tough time for taxi drivers, and I'm sure it's going to get tougher when the railway workers go on strike. To be fair, I'm not even sure why that's true, because presumably more people are going to take taxis when the trains don't work. But anyway, we'll leave that to one side. He assumed that taxi driver was going to say, oh, yes, I can't believe they've gone on strike in a time that was already difficult to me. He says, actually...
Chad, I even saw on Twitter, and I don't have it with me because it was so ridiculous. Can someone grab me the link of somebody saying, the Ukraine refugees are suffering because of the railway strike? Incredible.
There'll be a lot of people waking up this morning who will be saying we have this horrific cost of living squeeze. Fuel costs have gone up dramatically. Even yesterday, they've gone up the most they have in 17 years. Energy prices are soaring. The last thing we need is the threats of rail action, which means on those 3 days when I have to go to work, I can't use my car because it's too expensive. I've got to go on the train, and now I can't do that either.
I'd actually flip it the other way around, all right? In a context where the cost of living crisis is being paid for by ordinary workers, the thing that you need are strong unions and the ability to collectively bargain for better pay and conditions. Now, why the RMT are striking, which is, I notice, not something people have talked about, is that workers who had been keeping the railways running during the pandemic are being threatened with job cuts and a pay freeze, which would mean that their pay isn't keeping up with inflation. And so that's why the union is doing their job and saying, we will use our strength, which is the fact that you can't run this without us, to protect and defend our workers' conditions. That is the job of a trade union. And if it's so important to keep the railway running, because I agree, these workers are totally essential, then the bosses should be coming up with a reasonable package that the workers can accept. Every single person in this country has benefited from rights which have been secured by trade unions and the right to strike, including minimum wage, maternity pay, sick pay. These are all things which, before they were made law, were won by trade unions, and they benefited everybody. Because you're essentially selling a myth to the people of this country. You're saying, well, if you ask nicely, if you play nicely, if you're a good little boy or girl, maybe the bosses will take pity on you. That's not how it works. Workers have one form of power, and that is collective bargaining. And every right we have as workers in this country has been secured by playing hardball.
Damn, that's based. Damn, that's based. And somebody said this is the best argument for unions I've watched in years. Bro! This is the basic shit! Wow, we are so far behind. Sex workers stand in solidarity with the RMT union members because we both deserve the right to run trains in safe working conditions with full workers' rights and protections. Okay, that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. I think that both the sex workers are queens when they run a train, and I think the railway workers should run a train onto the queen. Over the queen. You know what I mean. Getting me through the worst part of this workday. Keep it up, Mike. That's right. Thanks for the prime. Ukraine rant, Mike. I had to explain the tube strike to the 17-year-old Ukrainian staying with me. Her father, brother, and uncle are all fighting. She's just got a job in a bar, and she smiled for the first time last week. A 17-year-old works at a bar in the UK? Now she can't go and won't get paid. But why do they strike? She wailed. Imagine using the plight of Ukrainians to make up a story about the tube strikes. I certainly have not made this story up. The 17-year-old Ukrainian living with me is in tears at my kitchen table. She and her mother escaped the Russians who destroyed the town next to hers and drove across Europe. Now she's been defeated by the tube strike. I guess she became 17. She got older. Oh my God. Oh my God.
No, I understand trade unions. I used to be a miner. I'm absolutely in favor of people taking strike action to defend their pay. It's like, okay.
If I have what's known as the Roman nose, you should check it out. That was the culture of people who dominated whatever shit-slinging tribe you were from. You know what's really funny is when the Nazis were doing their archaeology, they found out that like Germans had like no culture, no writing. They were basically like a shit-slinging tribe. And Hitler privately was like, stop digging up the fact, stop pointing out we have cave paintings. The Romans were building fucking aqueducts and we're slaying shit against cave walls. So, that was pretty awkward. Pretty awkward historical fact. They were sacrificing people into like the fucking middle of the Middle Ages. Yeah, did you know that? They had like human sacrifice well into the middle of the Middle Ages. We had to civilize their asses forcefully. Someone who drove across Europe to escape war, I would imagine it wouldn't scoff at taking a bike to work. Yeah, I mean, so it's pretty funny. I'm talking about when I say Italians.
Thanks for speaking to us. See ya. He didn't want to ask any more to that guy. That was not the guy he wanted to speak to on GB News. Barnaby, obviously, I love seeing clips like that. Obviously, the whole dominant narrative in the media is trying to...
Yeah, they did. They crossed the line a number of times. It was so valueless, they didn't bother colonizing it. The wealth was in the East, Asia, Middle East, the Bosphorus, Mediterranean was the Roman puddle, because that's where the value and wealth was. Going into what? Freezing cold forests with shit-slinging tribesmen? There was no point. There was nothing of value up there.
Divide the people in the RMT, railway workers, and people who use the railways, or any other worker whatsoever. So it's RMT versus the world, not it's RMT versus the bosses.
Rome still lost to barbarians? I mean, I think you're talking about Great Migrations, which were when those populations were displaced from the steppes by, other steppe people. It's complicated.
But it's great when so many people have basically, seen through that lie.
Yeah, the funny thing about that interview, the confusion in the face of the interviewer, is that, of course, a minute ago, people like that taxi driver were heroes of the right-wing press. They were constructed as honest working-class people. The Tories said they were now the party of the working class. One MP even suggested changing their name to the Workers' Party because they were trying to prosecute a culture war in which they claimed to defend working-class people who were threatened by basically other poor people who were darker than them or more desperate than them or from various different minorities. And so here the emptiness of that Tory talk of championing workers is really revealed. Workers are championed only when they are subservient, when they're glad to be workers and doff their caps, when they're deferential, when they're celebrating the Queen or attacking poor people on benefits or poor people who are refugees or anyone who's trans. When it's about standing up for themselves for a better life against the profiteering wealthy, workers then, of course, become villains terrifying. And you see that the spectre of evil groups against which the whole of the society must defend itself in a moral panic can easily apply to workers, even if they're white, just as it can apply to refugees and to LGBT people and to Muslims and so on. So workers even become disloyal to the nation when they go on strike. The Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph, accuses the RMT of being in league with Putin. Well, we hear sometimes about a choice between class politics and identity politics, including on the left. Really, you can have an identity politics of anything, or what we used to call on the left, an emancipatory politics, a politics that dreams of freedom. You can have an identity politics of class, just as you can of race or gender, a politics that says, I'm a worker.
I want to say that I agree with this because, but I think you splash around with confusing people when you talk like this. Obviously when you're talking about like how people operate politically, like if you're studying human political action, I would call it an operative identity. Like, what about you is what's motivating your political action, right? Is it because you're white? Are you acting because you are a worker, a union member? You are, quote, middle class? You're a suburbanite? What exactly about, or your religion? What about you? And this shifts in everybody. Certain things have more prominence than others depending upon conditions. That's part of the waves, is like sometimes if you're addressing politics as a unionized worker, you're going to act in a certain way. If you're addressing politics as a suburbanite, you're going to act in a certain way. And so we have to rebuild our political structures to foment class struggle, worker identity. That is the essence of the project for me.
That's all I ever want to be. I want to doff my cap to the boss and do as I'm told. Or an emancipatory politics of class, just as you can of race and gender, that says, I'm a worker, I'm exploited in the workplace, I am talented and skilled, and I do crucial work that keeps society afloat, but I don't want to be dominated, alienated, exploited, oppressed every day when I go into the workplace by a boss and by a free market that can lob me out of a job any moment. I want instead to have control over the conditions of my livelihood. That is the kind of politics of class. That's the kind of politics of working class histories and traditions that taxi driver knows because he was a miner, and that the Tory party will never, ever understand.
That GB News interview came just as the RMT confirmed that the largest rail strikes in 30 years will now go ahead. Here's General Secretary Mick Lynch.
Faced with such an aggressive agenda of cuts to jobs, conditions, pay and pensions, the RMT has no choice but to defend our members industrially and to stop this race to the bottom. The strikes on Network Rail, the train operators and London Underground will go ahead, and we again call on our members to stand firm, support the action, mount the pickets and demonstrate their willingness to fight for workplace justice. The RMT supports the campaign for a square deal for all working people in the face of the cost of living crisis. And our current campaign is a part of that more general campaign that means that public services have to be properly funded and all workers paid properly with good conditions. We remain available for discussions during the action and after the action and between the strike dates if the companies want to engage with us. But we are firmly of the belief that the only way for us to settle this dispute is for Grant Shapps and the government to allow these companies to negotiate and let the parties reach a reasonable agreement that will end the disruption of the service, will secure jobs and allow a decent transport system to be developed in this country.
Lynch went on to squarely lay the blame at the government's door.
To be fair to the companies, we have kept up cordial relationships with the employers all the way through this. But what we have come to understand is that the dead hand of this Tory government is all over this dispute. And the fingerprints of Grant Shapps and the DNA of Rishi Sunak are all over the problems on the railway and indeed the problems in this society. And until they allow these employers to negotiate freely, I can't see that we're going to get a settlement to the issues that are in front of us.
That was very poetically put. Later in the House of Commons, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps made this statement.
We're now less than 8 hours away from the biggest railway strike since 1989. A strike orchestrated by some of the best paid union barons, representing some of the better paid work.
Oh, the best paid union barons, as opposed to an actual baron. An actual baron was a millionaire.
Because in this country, which will cause misery and chaos to millions of commuters. And Mr. Speaker, this weekend, we've seen union leaders use all the tricks in the book to confuse, to obfuscate, to mislead the public. Not only do they wish to drag the railway back to the 1970s, they're also employing the tactics of bygone unions too, deflecting accountability for their strikes onto others, attempting to shift the blame for their action that will cause disruption and will cause damage to millions of people, and claiming that others are somehow preventing an agreement to their negotiation.
So there's Grant Shapps accusing unions of failing to take responsibility for their actions and of shifting blame to other people. Of course, this is a line that suits the government very well. It deflects from their own failures while building animosity to the unions amongst the public. But it turns out that Shapps is just lying. And Paul Waugh, writing in The Eye, brought the receipts. He reports, now, sources within the train operating companies, the TOCs, that run services on behalf of the Department for Transport have revealed that talks are deadlocked because they are not being allowed to properly negotiate with the RMT. Under the franchise model that had operated since the industry was privatised in the 1990s, rail firms were individually able to set detailed pay awards along with work terms and conditions. But the COVID pandemic's huge hit to passenger numbers led Transport Secretary Grant Shapps to scrap the model and replace it with a system where the state effectively controls the railways by paying a flat fee to firms that kept services running. In the process, individual rail companies have been left in a state of limbo when it comes to negotiating disputes with unions. So why did Shapps change the model?
Wow.
Well, because Rishi Sunak told him to. So they say the government wants the railways to reduce costs by about 10%. A $4 billion annual taxpayer subsidy became roughly $12 billion in COVID years, and the Treasury has said that rail subsidy must be slashed. That was Paul Waugh.
What's amazing to me is that nobody talks about the incredible subsidy, both the climate subsidy, like, you know, cars spewing pollution out their fucking tailpipe, causing respiratory problems, but also, you know, the carbon damage that's being done. That is a subsidy. We're going to have to pay for it later in the form of horrific climate change, you goddamn dipshits. Meanwhile, transport, I mean, for the UK, 12 billion, that's it? That's it? Insane. Strolled past the RMT union picket line for my train, a pretty pathetic effort from the strikers. Barely anyone bothered to show up. No screams of scab. The UK's original free market think tank. Founded in 1955. This motherfucker looks like Oswald Mosley. It looks like motherfucking Oswald Mosley with glasses. He looks like fucking Oswald Mosley, but wearing glasses. Somebody Photoshop this fucking pair of glasses on Oswald Mosley. Like literally famous British fascist. By the way, Chad, sorry. He was Great Britain's Hitler. He was trying to create fascism in the UK. He was the guy who failed. Sorry if you don't know who this is. My God. I mean, his nose is uglier. Did you watch this? Jesus, what a fucking clown. And everybody clowned on him. It was pretty funny, including me.
That 3% is a very good offer on the table with modernisation. But you've heard, even now, Network Rail are moving to a position where they're saying we will go above 3% with modernisation. And Mick's talking about, you know, modernisation is a scary thing. Modernisation such as installing an app on your phone so you can communicate better with your workers, or having sensors on trains to detect deficiencies in the rail network, I don't think are controversial things. I think they're good things because they means that drivers are safer and ultimately, or people on the rail line as well are safer. And that's what we want to see, the best health and safety we can. And what Mick's doing is undermining the rail network. We know passenger numbers are down by about 20% to pre-pandemic levels. We are in a world where we want to get to a place where we have net zero. That means encouraging more people onto public transport. These strikes are only going to drive people further away from it. And the pay rise that Mick wants will therefore just add more cost to the rail network, making it more unaffordable for more working people. He should be apologising to the doctors and nurses who can't get to hospital, the patients who can't get their operation, the kids who will miss out on their education today, but also those armed forces veterans who risk their lives for our freedoms, who won't be able to celebrate armed forces.
Oh my God. Notice how this is actually, I mean, if you fall for this, you're dumb as fuck. If you fall for this, you're dumb as fuck. We need to start like just calling people out for their blatant fucking manipulation. Give me a break. You're a dummy. Give me a break. Oh, armed forces, doctors, nurses. Who else do people like? Other workers, basically.
Forces Day on Saturday.
Do you want to apologise for all that, Mick?
Well, I think Jonathan.
What is that question? What? Do you want to apologize? What?
You should apologise for talking nonsense. None of that is true. We have got automated technology on trains. We've got pantograph cameras. We've got ultrasonic sensors. We've got things that detect faults on tracks. That is all rubbish. I negotiated that deal with Network Rail myself. We've got on-train technicians, all sorts of new technology that is being deployed. So that is just stuff that's written in Conservative Central Office for backbench MPs to spout
So no
along
sorry
with their
to veterans,
ministers.
Mick. Okay, so no
Now,
sorry to
I
veterans.
don't want this disruption. I don't want people to be
Good to know veterans are gonna be left
inconvenienced, and I
without
want a
celebration.
settlement to this dispute. I can't do that with a backbench MP who's just learned it off a script.
Well, hang on. Let
We
him
know
respond.
what the-
Well,
we
let him
know what
respond
the
to that.
issues are.
Let me respond.
God, he's fucking based. God, he's based. Let me see. I got more for the railway strike here.
The government is saying that they are going to bring in agency workers. My question to you is, I'm guessing that some of your members will still stay on the picket lines. What will they do if agency workers try to cross those picket lines?
Well, we will picket them. What do you think we'll do? We run a picket line and we'll ask them not to go to work. Do you not know how a picket
What
line
if they
works?
do anyway? I very much know how a picket line works. I'm much older than I look, Mr. Lynch. What will picketing involve?
Well, you can see what picketing involves. I can't believe this line of questioning. Picketing is standing outside the workplace to try and encourage people who want to go to work not to go to work. What else do you think it involves?
And what if they want? Well, I just wondered what else it might involve, because I very.
By the way, she looks old. I don't know what the fuck she's talking about. I look older. I'm older than I look. You look old. You look old. You look like you're nearing your mid-60s. You should probably retire. Like, what do you mean you don't look like what? You look old.
Very well remember the picket lines of the 1980s,
where are you going with your
Mr. Lynch. I'm asking you
Which
what your
ones are you
members would
talking
do,
about?
Mr. Lynch.
Which picket lines are you talking
The
about?
miners' strikes. Miners' strike.
Yeah. What does it look like, the miners' strike? What
No,
are
it
you
doesn't,
talking
Mr.
about?
Lynch, and I'm just asking. I'm just to clarify.
Seems to have gone off into
I'm
the
just
world
trying
of
to
the
clarify.
surreal.
No, Mr.
What are you
Lynch, and I'm
talking
sorry if you feel the need to ridicule me, but I'm just asking you what you expect your members.
Who is this? Who's the reporter, chat?
Strike.
Yeah.
She's 61? Oh, my Lord in heaven. It looks like I pegged her age exactly right. Because she doesn't look young. As you know, chat, if you have a hard time figuring out ages, it's a skill you look up. You figure out age 61. Retire! You know, the strongest argument for union rights is that it'll force boomers to retire. Jesus Christ.
Look like the miners' strike. What
No,
are
it
you
doesn't,
talking
Mr.
about?
Lynch, and I'm just asking. I'm just to clarify.
Seems to have gone off into
I'm
the
just
world
trying
of
to
the
clarify.
surreal.
No, Mr.
What are you
Lynch, and I'm
talking
sorry if
Yeah,
you
we're
feel
gonna
the
make
need to
fun of Jimmy
ridicule
Dore
me,
later.
but I'm just asking you what you expect your members
But
to
your
do
questions
if agency
are
workers.
verging into the nonsense.
I'm
We will
asking
picket
you.
as
No,
effectively
they're not.
as we can.
And what does that involve?
Look, there it is. That's what it involves.
So you won't stop agency workers crossing the picket line.
We will try to stop agency workers crossing the picket line by asking them not to go to work. What is it you're suggesting we will
And if
do?
I'm just asking you.
you're
I'm trying to
suggesting that we will do?
clarify for the benefit of the British public who are being stopped from
clarify
travelling
what?
around the country, Mr. Lynch. I'm just trying to clarify exactly what your
is it
members
you're
will
trying
do.
to clarify?
Ask politely. Thank you for.
I'm replying to you
want
politely.
to answer the question.
Ageism in chat is not a good look. Her ideas might be old, but his ideas are older, and he is probably older and obviously based. Oh, I'm not saying that his. Of course, picket lines and strikes are an old idea. Of course they are, because they're the only effective idea that we have. But when she says, when he asks her, when she's asking him dumbass motherfucking hack questions, it says, "I'm younger, I'm older than I look." Well, then that invites us to say, no, you're not. You're not. You don't look young. You're old. You're tired. And your opinions are out of the neoliberal 80s. Retire. You know, when you were in your prime. She doesn't look young. She looks quite old. She should probably retire.
What we will.
Okay, Mr. Lynch.
I've answered the question about 6 times. If there are people trying to cross the picket line, we ask them not to cross it.
I'm asking questions on behalf of my viewers this morning, Mr. Lynch. I'm very sorry.
Oh, she's dumb as fuck. She's dumb as fuck.
I'm guessing that your members will stay on the picket lines. What will happen if the agency workers try to cross those picket lines?
Well, we'll picket them. What do you think we'll do?
And what will that involve?
We'll ask them not to go to work. Do you know how a picket line works?
Of course I do. I'm not as young as I look.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realise.
It's not a medical thing.
Right.
So, what will...
Jesus Christ. It really is a different world. When was the last time leaders weren't all geriatric? I have a hard time imagining. You know, leaders used to be like in their 30s and 40s and 50s, you know? You had the occasional old, but people, you know, were in their prime of their lives. They were middle-aged. They were, you know, senior. There was always, of course, seniors as important parts of any movement. But not every single fucking talking head was 80 or 60, 70 or 80. Not every single leader was 80 years fucking old. The only time we have young people on the left now in American politics is when they defeat some boomer that wouldn't retire. Jesus Christ.
That 3% is a...
Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, did I watch? Okay.
The I. And apparently it's not just the unions that are unhappy about this. The rail companies hate it too. A source told the I, we are in talks with the RMT, but I can understand the union getting frustrated because all we are allowed to talk about is the overall boundaries. None of the TOCs have been given a clear mandate to negotiate detailed pay rates. If we get the right reforms to weekend working practices we want and the union engage on staffing levels, I reckon we could hammer out a deal on pay. Without a mandate from government, we can't even address the pay question. Barnaby, so it seems that the Tories are being pretty duplicitous here. They're saying in public, this is just the unions gagging for a fight. They're being offered a pay rise. Why are they complaining? At the same time, they got government ministers going out saying, no, they can't possibly get a pay rise because that would be inflationary. And all while this is going on, you've got the people who actually, you know, run the rail companies, who I'm not normally particularly sympathetic towards, saying, you know, if the government just kept out of this, we probably could come to some kind of deal.
It is so depressing. I mean, let me put it this way. Public transport ought to be key to a green transition. So rather than cutting 2,000 jobs, as Network Rail have threatened to the RMT, rather than forcing an 8% real terms pay cut, because we've got inflation, onto low-paid cleaners and highly skilled engineers who have all had real pay cuts for 3 years in a row, rather than all of that, we should be rolling out new railways everywhere as part of a strategy to make travel easier and less carbon intensive. So this strike is a kind of image of a government that thrashes around in chaos rather than grasping the big challenges of our times. You know, they chase headlines putting electronic tags on refugees in the hope of winning votes by attacking the most desperate people. They chase headlines by scapegoating low-paid workers who are desperately needed for a climate transition because they have no answers for an age of entwined economic, social, and ecological crisis. But part of the tragedy here is that no politician in Britain today is proposing the kind of bold strategy, at least no leading politician, not Boris Johnson and not Keir Starmer, the kind of bold strategy that would pay workers well to do the work we need done to transition our economy and our society to face challenges of catastrophic climate change. Those answers aren't coming from above. They're not coming from the top. Our whole party politics is stuck in a kind of staid moderation. Without a state project to solve these problems, people have to take things into their own hands. People can't rely on government to sort it for them. People have to do things like going on strike to ensure they get decent pay and decent conditions. That's why it's not just RMT members, it's teachers in the NASUWT, it's nurses, it's posties in the CWU. All of these groups are now talking about preparing to ballot for possible industrial action, for possible strikes, because they know that's the only way, by fighting back themselves, that they can get decent pay and decent conditions. And if they don't act, even though it will be inconvenient for lots of people, if they don't act, we'll continue to spiral into a society where a tiny clique of the wealthy few get all of the resources, and inflation is used to launch a stealth class war, further impoverishing most of our society. The unions then aren't just causing some temporary inconvenience, they're also the only bastion in defense of the 99% against a very small wealthy clique. And so I think we should salute the RMT today.
All of us here at Novara Media are working harder than ever to...
I'm just binging off of the Labour leader going out and just taking on these hacks in the media.
If you're saying that everyone deserves a pay rise, are you not worried about the impact that this could have on inflation, which is, the very thing that everyone's really concerned about? The Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey calling for pay restraint because it could...
Well, his pay restraint, he's on £600,000 a year, as is the chief of Network Rail. There are railway bosses taking home millions of pounds every year. The railways made £500 million of profit last year when fares and passengers were at an all-time low. People are stripping money out of the railway, they're stripping money out of the economy. And if workers' wages don't go up, it means a transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich. We've got more billionaires than we've ever had in this country. The rich have never been richer. And the reason they're able to do that and get richer all the time is because they're deliberately depressing workers' wages. Inflation has come on board now, and virtually nobody's had a pay rise for the last 2 or 3 years. So this idea that there's a wages price spiral is nonsense.
What a fucking Chad!
If you're saying that everyone deserves a pay rise...
What a fucking Chad, dude.
With respect to everything in the economy, there are lower paid people and there are wealthy people in this society.
He's the head of the British Railway Union.
There is an imbalance between the people that do the work to keep this country going, who create the wealth of our civilization and don't get a fair share of that wealth because it's going to people who are vastly wealthy. We should be comfortable with backing working class people who are struggling. And one of the ways that they can redress the imbalance is through industrial action where negotiations fail. What else are we to do? Are we to plead? Are we to beg? We want to bargain for our futures. We want to negotiate. And if we're not bargaining, you have to beg. And I don't want any working class people in this country to have to beg the employers for a decent living. I think there are going to be many unions balloting across the country because people can't take it anymore. We've got people who are doing full-time jobs who are having to take state benefits and use food banks. That is a national disgrace. And Grant Shapps is fairly blasé about that.
God, he's a fucking Chad, dude. He's a fucking Chad.
Struggle, class war.
Well, there's a class aspect to everything in the economy.
He's fucking Chad, dude. What a fucking Chad. Quizzed on whether he's a Marxist? What is this title? Comments are turned off. What the fuck?
Strike today for the RMT is waiting for us at Euston Station. Mr. Lynch, good morning to you. It's going to be a busy day for you today. Can we just get one thing nailed to the wall before we get going here? You've been accused severally in the last few weeks of being a Marxist. It happened again last night. A backbench Tory MP said you were a Marxist with no interest in anything other than trying to tear down the government. Now, are you or are you not a Marxist? Because if you are a Marxist, then you're into revolution and into bringing down capitalism. So are you or aren't you?
Richard, you do come up with the most remarkable twaddle sometimes, I've got to say.
I didn't say you were a Marxist. I'm saying that you're being accused of being a Marxist, and that's not twaddle. That's called reporting.
No, I'm not. I'm not a Marxist. I'm an elected official of the RMT. I'm a working-class bloke leading a trade union dispute about jobs, pay and conditions of service. So it's got nothing to do with Marxism. It's all about this dispute. It's an industrial dispute, and that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. I emphasise I am not talking twaddle and accusing you of being a Marxist. I'm merely quoting people who are, including many of the newspapers.
Well, that's what it sounds like to me.
Well, I'm sorry if it did, but I don't think it was. But anyway, to be absolutely clear, you are not a Marxist. Fine. Tell us about this letter that you saw last night.
I'm also not the international centre of evil, which Piers Morgan calls me the other night.
All right,
I'm leading an industrial dispute, Richard, and I'm trying to get a settlement to it.
All right, enough of the badinage. Let's get down to detail. This letter that you saw last night about redundancies, are they voluntary redundancies or mandatory redundancies?
They're a statutory notice of redundancy, so they will be compulsory if we can't get an agreement that they're not. So at the moment, they're the statutory redundancy notice, which is compulsory under law.
And has that raised the ante?
2,900 was the number.
Yeah, 900. And has that
raised...
raised...
Well, it's an escalation of the dispute, isn't it? What?
Carry on.
It's an escalation of the dispute, Richard. We went over there last night and they said that we'd get an increased revised pay offer and some revisions to what they had on the table. Instead of doing that, they've issued a statutory redundancy notice. So that is an escalation of the dispute and makes it harder to get a settlement.
But Mick Lynch, you did know that these redundancies were on the table. All you wanted was for it to be ruled out that they would be compulsory. Have you got any further in understanding that? Because what the other side is saying, and we've got Network Rail on, is that they believe that they can get the majority of these through voluntary redundancy, given that so many of the workers are over 60, that actually that you're potentially escalating the narrative by suggesting that, you know, that they might all be compulsory, when in fact that isn't the case, is it?
Well, they might all be compulsory because it's a statutory redundancy notice. That implies compulsory redundancies. That's the way the statute works. It's a law that was brought in 1992 by the Tory government. So what we've got here is a situation where they're not offering any guarantee of no compulsory redundancies. They are imposing changes to working practices which will rip up the culture of the railway and rip up the protections that our members have in regards to work-life balance, rostering, weekend and night working. And they've also not given us a pay rise, in some cases on the railway, for up to 3 years. Now, there's a straightforward way to settle that, and the best way to do it is for the government to unshackle the companies so that we can get a settlement. And I'm sure if they did that, I could reach agreement with these companies fairly quickly.
The problem is, of course, that you can't even get the Labour Party on side, at least not publicly. That's a problem for you, isn't it? You can't get your traditional party who are there. You give donations to the Labour Party. How angry are you about that?
Keir Starmer, so the centrists have taken back control of the UK Labour Party, and they are as anti... And centrists are centrists, man. What do you want me to say? They're scared of a fight. Their tactic is, we'll just be neutral. That'll make people love us. That is a centrist strategy. And they're despised by the working class and laughed out by the... I mean, they're paid to lose. What a fucking loser.
We don't give any donations to the Labour Party. That's another myth. We are not affiliated to the Labour Party. I'm not a member of the Labour Party, and we have no formal association with them. It's not a problem that we can't get Labour on side. Labour's problem is they can't get working people on side, and they can't get them to vote for them in traditional working class areas.
I don't know if you'll describe this as twaddle as well, but this is what David Blunkett, former frontbencher, of course, said last night, and I quote, "I am a lifelong trade unionist. I am proud to belong to one of Britain's largest unions. But to be specific, I believe in modern trade unionism. What I don't believe in is one set of workers knocking 7 bells out of another set." So if there is a class war going on, it's sort of...
Oh my God, what a scumbag!
Sort of within the same class, he's saying. Well, what would you say to Mr. Blunkett?
What a fucking lying sack of shit. That's Keir Starmer's
I'd say
people.
talking nonsense. What this is about is our members being threatened. We've got an aggressive attitude from the employers. They're using COVID as a smokescreen. And what David Blunkett ought to do is identify with other workers who need a similar deal to the one that the RMT is campaigning for. We just happen to be at the front and centre of these problems. But the teachers' unions are telling us they're going to campaign. Unison, the Health Service Union and the Public Services Union are telling us they're going to campaign. Even the criminal barristers in this country are going to be having a strike ballot. So there's something wrong in this society. Wealth is imbalanced. There are super billionaires. There are more rich people than they've ever been. They've never been wealthier. And while we've got full employment, we've got falling real wages. That has got to be addressed. People are in full-time jobs are taking state benefits, and they're having to go to food banks to feed themselves. Now, anyone can work that out. You don't have to be a Marxist or a social scientist to work out that there's a problem at the heart of our society. And it's up to the trade unions to bring back balance and bring back equality to the workplace. And that's what we're part of.
All right,
and
Mr.
that's
Lynch.
what we intend to do.
All right, now listen, Ranveer has a question for you about Grant Shapps in a moment. But just before that, I want to play you something that we had on yesterday's programme. We interviewed live...
I mean, the media class in the English-speaking world needs to be purged. Like, legitimately, we need an entire new set of people. Holy fucking hell.
A professor who's an oncologist, whose job it is to save lives and to extend lives. He treats people with cancer. And this is what he had to say about the effects of the action that your men are taking.
Where's the balance? This is incredible. Not one person that they can find supporting them? Really? You can't find anybody supporting. This is incredible.
Men and women are taking today.
Oncology services are under a particular breaking point at the moment due to catch up from lockdown and difficulty recruiting.
Consultant.
So this is going to lead to
maybe we should start taking people out who wear glasses. Jesus Christ.
He's saying basically that this strike is going to cost lives. People with cancer are going to die, and they wouldn't have done if they'd been able to get their treatment today and later in the week and on Saturday.
Sounds like you should negotiate.
Well, I don't accept that, and I don't accept that railway workers are the cause of the problems in the oncology departments of hospitals. My own wife is an NHS nurse. I've got many friends and family that work in the NHS, and of course the NHS is crying out for proper funding. Most of the problems in the NHS are caused by rampant privatisation and profiteering by private sector providers that are currently consuming the NHS. Now, we don't have to have this dispute. Yeah. This dispute is caused by government policy. And if we can get a settlement for that, we can move the people around, they can get to their appointments, get to the workplace and enjoy their leisure activities. We want a settlement as keenly as anyone else.
And on that point, you mentioned the government.
Rail workers are not killing cancer patients.
Would it have made any
legitimately, this is batshit crazy.
Today's strike if Grant Shapps had turned up at the negotiating table?
Yes, it would, because he would have to stop telling lies about the situation and start facing reality. Grant Shapps is at the negotiating table, albeit in a form that leaves him to one side on the end of a telephone, on the end of a Zoom call. His officials are dictating the mandate of the train operating companies.
Yeah, we watched that.
Network Rail, and they're doing that actively, and nobody on the management side of the table is denying it. Every time they speak to us, or we put a suggestion to them, they have to leave the room and then go and phone their political bosses in Whitehall. So they may as well get on with it. Either he facilitates a mandate that's going to settle this dispute, or he sends people to the table, his officials, or himself, that can settle the dispute directly. So this is all down to him. It's all his responsibility, and he can negotiate with us directly or let the managers get on with it.
OK, thank you.
A majority of UK adults say the rail strikes this week are justified. 2/3 say the government did not do enough to prevent the strikes. Thank fucking God. Let's go. Let's fucking go.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Lynch. Thank you for your time. Talk to you again, I'm sure.
We also have, of course, the Chief Executive of Network Rail, Andrew Haines, coming up. We'll ask him about that letter that they sent last night about
the
redundancies and whether that has indeed escalated the problems today. We've also got Grant Shapps, and we'll ask him why he chose not to be first, right there at the table in person.
It's interesting.
There are lower paid people and there are wealthy people in this society. And what's wrong in this society is that there is an imbalance between the people that do the work to keep this country going, who create the wealth of our civilization and don't get a fair share of that wealth because it's going to people
Good
who
thing
are
labor is neutral with a popular strike. Exactly.
wealthy.
Worthless
Be
coward.
comfortable with backing working class people who are struggling. And one of the
Fucking
ways that
cowards,
they
man.
can redress the imbalance is through industrial action where negotiations fail. What else are we to do? Are we to plead? Are we to beg?
Man, he's so fucking based, man. Holy shit. Is he fucking based? And Keir Starmer's fucking cowardice is incredible. His cowardice is fucking incredible. Thomas the Tank Engine branded a scab after turning up for work as normal. Speaking up earlier, colleague Percy told us, fucking scab. I knew he'd turn up for work, that self-entitled prick. It's only because he gets paid the most and thinks he's the big shot and nobody else matters. Look, we're taking this action for a good reason and everyone is on board, including James, Edward, and Emily. And that fat bastard controller who we're not allowed to call fat anymore because he's all gone a bit PC. But Thomas has to turn up for work on time because he doesn't want to upset anyone. He makes me physically sick. I can't look him in the eye. Where's the solidarity? How could he hold his head up next time he sees Henry after all the adventures we had all been through? Asked to comment on criticism earlier, Thomas told us, I think we are paid reasonably well, to be honest. Plus, between you and me, I'm a bit of a Tory, so these unions, erg. Fuck you, Thomas.
A very good offer on the table with modernisation, but you've heard even now.
Okay, we watched that one already, right? Okay, so that's the British Railway Union's strike. They're being led by an incredibly talented leader, so I'm excited. I'm excited about that, and I wish them the best, and hopefully they can crack the fucking government in half. How hurtful would it be for these people to come out? If he says, oh, I'm a Marxist, then people are gonna be like, well, you want revolution, you want bloody revolution, you want a civil war. I mean, that's the distraction. That's the distraction. So he's just like, it's not relevant to what he's trying to do. Are you watching the stream unsubbed? You're making income inequality worse. You are doing anti-praxis. We are the only Twitch stream that will not accept scam advertisers, and I will never fuck you over by selling you crap.